For most of American history, when you thought about migration, it was pretty much a one-way street. People were leaving the South to find opportunities somewhere else. But then, in the back half of the 20th century, that street made a complete U-turn. We're about to dive into one of the biggest demographic reversals in modern history.
So, that's the big question we're tackling. What really happens when the flow of people in a country completely reverses itself? This is about so much more than just numbers on a census sheet. It's about the identity of an entire region, and really, the reshaping of a whole country. To get our heads around this U-turn, we first have to look at how the map used to be drawn.
For more than half a century, this was the dominant story. We're talking about 6 million Black Americans leaving the brutal reality of the Jim Crow South, heading north in search of factory jobs and a life with more freedom. They built new communities and totally transformed the culture of cities like Chicago, Detroit, and New York. This was the established flow of people in America.
Okay, but here's the twist. Even while the Great Migration was still going on, a totally new movement, going in the complete opposite direction, was starting to bubble up. And over the next 60 years, it grew into a tidal wave, pulling millions of Americans back to the South and flipping that historic trend on its head.
Now, this massive reversal wasn't just one single event. It was actually driven by two powerful parallel migrations, both pouring into the same destination, the American South.
So let's break this down. On one hand, you've got what's called the Sunbelt migration. This is a really broad trend of Americans from all backgrounds moving south for warmer weather, new jobs, you name it. But happening right alongside it was something more specific, and you could say more profound: the new Great Migration. This was the children and grandchildren of the very people who had fled the South, now returning.
And that's really the heart of it. The new Great Migration wasn't just about finding a better job. For a new generation of younger, college-educated Black professionals, it was a powerful chance to reconnect with their family history, with their ancestral roots, but in a South that was profoundly different from the one their grandparents had to leave behind. It was like a homecoming, but to a whole new place.
So, the big question is, how on earth did this happen? What could possibly be powerful enough to reverse a century-long pattern of migration? Well, it wasn't any single thing. It was a perfect storm of social, economic, and legal changes that all came together over a few decades.
And this timeline just lays it all out so perfectly. First, in the mid-60s, you have the Civil Rights Movement, which finally dismantled the legal structure of segregation. Then in the 70s, the economic engine of the North, the Rust Belt, starts to sputter and decline. And then finally, starting in the 80s, the South's economy completely reinvents itself, suddenly offering the kinds of jobs the North was losing.
You can really boil it all down to a simple push and pull dynamic. The North started to push people out as its old industries died off, and at the exact same time, a modernized, air-conditioned South began to pull people in with the promise of economic growth and a higher quality of life.
And let's be absolutely clear about this. None of the economic pull, none of the growth, would have mattered for the new Great Migration without the end of Jim Crow. The passage of civil rights laws was the key that unlocked the whole thing. It's what made it even possible for Black Americans to see the South as a place where they could build a real future.
So, millions of people move south. What happens next? What does that look like on the ground? Well, this incredible wave of people, of ambition, of new ideas, it didn't just add to the South. It completely remade it. It forged what we now call the New South.
Just look at the cities that were basically born from this shift. You've got Atlanta, which went from a regional town to a booming global hub, a center for business and Black culture that's often called the Black Mecca.
Then there's Dallas, which just exploded into this huge, sprawling metroplex, completely driven by finance, tech, and a massive influx of new people.
The same incredible story played out in Houston, which became a giant in energy and medicine, pulling in talent from all over the country and the world.
And of course, there's Charlotte, which basically came out of nowhere to become the second largest banking center in the entire United States. I mean, these weren't just growing towns, they became new epicenters of the American economy.
So when you put it all together, what does it look like? It looks like this. This migration fueled explosive growth in cities. It made the whole region way more diverse, and it turned the South into an economic powerhouse that now rivals the Northeast. The entire demographic center of gravity of the United States literally shifted southward. Okay, so we've just walked through this massive 60-year transformation. What's the main takeaway here? What does all this really mean for the America that we're living in right now? I think it really boils down to two huge things. First, this was a mind-blowing historic reversal that literally rewrote the nation's population map. And second, this movement forged a completely new identity for the South, one that is modern, diverse, and economically crucial, shattering old stereotypes in a wave of new arrivals.
And that leaves us with one final fascinating question to chew on. This huge movement of people didn't just end in 2010. It's still happening. It continues to redraw our political maps, influence our culture, and define what America is going to look like for the rest of the 21st century. This isn't just history, folks. It's a story that is still being written every single day.